Hello, everyone, and welcome to SoDA series on Adobe XD Ideas. My name is Jamie Myrold, and I am Vice President of Design at Adobe. And today I have the great pleasure of chatting with the amazing Bruce Ma. Bruce is a brilliantly creative optimist, is what we will call him. Bruce's love of thorny problems led him to create a methodology for whole system transformation. And across 30 years of design innovation, Bruce has collaborated with leading organizations, heads of state, renowned artists, and fellow optimists. And recently has released a new book, MC24, which is structured around 24 principles for designing massive change in your life and work, which is an important, super important topic at this time and age in our lives in 2020. And I believe that design really has never been more important than it is right now. And so Bruce's take on these design principles, particularly in this book, are so relevant to our times today. So welcome, Bruce. I'm super excited and happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Jamie. It's delightful to be here.
Great. So I have some questions for you, obviously. I wanted to start out with just talking a little bit about your career. You've had a illustrative, long-standing career, and you're still right in the midst of it all. So it would be great if you could just talk to us a little bit about the work that you've done and sort of how you look at design not as a lowercase d problem, but really as a capital D problem, and really as a multidisciplinary way of solving big, real, big, hairy problems, I'll call them.
Yeah, I consider myself one of the most fortunate designers of the last half century. I've collaborated with some absolutely extraordinary people. Learned so much from them. Learned so much from my clients and the challenges. And that kind of evolution from what you call small d to big D, it happened very organically. I didn't really have a kind of plan for that, but I happened along when design itself was changing. And I think that I kind of took that ride and to some degree kind of contributed to the transformation. But also, I think what was happening was that because of technology, because of devices like this, the world was being connected, and that was making everything communicate. And that I think was the kind of big transformation of our time, that suddenly we were living in a transparent world where you could see things that had been invisible or kind of behind the curtain for most of history. And that meant that people needed to design not only what they look like, but also what they do. And that was the kind of, I think for me, that was the big insight in my work, that I realized, let's turn the sound off and really look at what you're doing. And if that is telling a story that's not what you want to tell, then we have to redesign it. And so our work really shifted from kind of what it looks like to what it does, and ultimately to what we call life-centered design, which is really thinking about our place in the universe in a new way, thinking about ourselves and our practice and our businesses and our culture as being part of life itself. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that especially, today in 2020, we've had so many changes. And the book came out in the beginning of 2020, right? And
That's right. It came out in July, but it went to press at the beginning of the year. So it went
okay,
to press before the pandemic hit.
right.
Um, and I have to say that when it became clear what the pandemic was and just the scale of it, I actually called the publisher and said, I'm going to look like an idiot. My book is radically optimistic. And their response was, I was hoping to make some changes. And they said, it's too late. It's at the bindery. And secondly, you can't make any changes. Your story is your story, and it's actually really desperately needed right now. That we need that optimistic outlook.
So can you talk a little bit about the premise of the book for those that may not have seen it or know about it? Yeah.
So the premise really started, the book really started about 10 years ago when I was made an honorary Royal Designer for Industry by the RSA in London. And they sent a group of young leaders to Chicago to visit the studio and to talk to us about our work. And I showed them the work I was doing and, that we'd been doing in the studio. And, we were designing, cities and carpets and social institutions and social movements and brands and businesses. And they said, you're a really weird kind of designer. Like what kind of designer are you? Because we think of design being defined by the product. In other words, architects do buildings and graphic designers do two-dimensional things. And I said, I'm a designer, this is what I do. And they said, how do you do it? And I said, well, I just showed you. You should have paid attention. And they said, no, you showed us the results, but you actually didn't show anything about how you think like this. How are you able to do it? And I realized, kind of in the moment that I didn't really have an answer for them. I didn't really know how we did it. It was just something that, evolved over, a 20, 25-year period. And that we had somehow managed to do it. And I realized that, I don't know is not a really good answer. And so we sat down and said, there must be principles. You can't succeed so consistently without having principles. And so we tried to understand what are those principles so that anyone could really apply them and advance their work. And our ambition was really to put the power of design into as many hands as possible, much beyond the design community itself. I think that, I argue in the book, and we would argue that we are all designers now. We're all designing our lives. We're living in designed environments. We're interacting. Adobe is a design company, and all companies now are design companies. And so we need to think more deeply about what we're designing. We need to take responsibility for our design. And so that really was the kind of premise. And we sat down and tried to understand what are the principles, and we ended up with 24 of them. And I think that's pretty comprehensive. We've tried to reduce it and tried to enlarge it, and unsuccessfully. So I think we're kind of settled on these 24. And they're really tools that you can use. It's really about giving people a kind of toolkit to help them, integrate design into their lives and into their work and their business.
Absolutely. And what I love about it is, and design thinking and problem solving within the enterprise or within business has been around, but I think that the principles really do help to sort of root that and expand it and help folks to really see how, if they don't identify as a designer or a creative person, how what they are doing is actually you see themselves within the principles. And actually one of the principles that I want to talk about is the one, I think it's the second one, which is begin with fact-based optimism. Mm-hmm. And maybe, touch on optimism from your perspective. It's one of the main themes that comes up when we think of Bruce Ma. And also, had said about, the book coming out when it did in 2020, and feeling that the book might have been too optimistic. And I have a different perspective. I mean, it is definitely optimistic, and I love it. I feel like it's wholeheartedly something that we need right now, even more so than, probably even before the pandemic, but we needed it then. But anyway, I don't know what's in that question, but it's really around that principle and optimism and the book itself in this time.
Well, when we did, I did a project called Massive Change about, I think it's 13 years ago now. And there was something that was really bugging me at the time, which was that even in the creative sphere, even in the kind of the world of world changing, people who are imagining the future, there was a kind of cynicism and negative energy creeping in, and people were quite negative about things. And I was experiencing the opposite. I was meeting people who were changing the world in every way, and I was really troubled by this idea of having the kind of negative energy being superimposed on creative work, because our responsibility is to find optimism. It is not our job to be negative. And I take this very seriously. It's like our principal responsibility is to be, first of all, honest, which is the fact-based part of it, and secondly, optimistic. We have to see opportunities where other people see constraints. So our responsibility as designers is to find the pathway that other people can't see. And so in our domain, I mean, it's, cynicism is for other people. Like, anyone else can be cynical. I get it. I can understand why you might be, even though the facts are radically against you. But as designers, we don't have that luxury. I like to say that we can't afford the luxury of cynicism as designers. And so that's what Begin with Fact-Based Optimism is about. And it's really a kind of methodology to, first of all, go to the data, right? Go to the information. Unlike any time in history, we have data. We can see the world for the first time. I mean, it's hard to imagine, we were talking earlier about what it was like before computers in the workplace. It's hard to imagine how we worked without data, and without seeing the world, without being able to quantify it. And now, if you're working, you can get information on what you're doing on a level that is, that was for most of history unimaginable.
Right.
And now we can really apply it and change the world.
Yeah, I think it's such a great message, right? Because I think if designers or folks just hear, let's be optimistic, it's all going to work out, whatever. I think that it's like this super positive, blissful, everything's flowers and roses. It's really that, going into problem solving, understanding the facts and being open to possibility, right? Instead of like starting from a place of, oh, we have so many constraints, oh, it's going to be so hard. So I mean, that principle just really speaks to me, and what I've experienced in my career as well. So I really like it. So then let's talk about another one of the principles. So another one that I really like is the one around compete with beauty. So can you talk a little bit about what you mean when you talk about beauty? And you've also talked about, being surprised that businesses don't have a beauty strategy. So can you talk a little bit about what that means?
Sure. I realize that, because I've taught in architecture schools and design schools, and if you walked into an architecture school today as a student and you put up a project and you said, I did it because it's beautiful. You would get an F. And you would fail out of architecture school. Um, and it's an indicator, it's a symptom of the fact that we are um, reluctant to embrace beauty. We don't teach it for the most part. We don't actually talk about it, and we don't really acknowledge how powerful it is. When in fact, beauty drives everything. I mean, people will spend more for beauty. They'll move heaven and earth for beauty. They'll suffer for beauty. I mean, think about what we will do for beauty. And yet, almost no one I've ever met as a client has a beauty strategy. They don't understand how to integrate beauty into their business comprehensively, not only visually, but also just really comprehensively thinking about how is what I do a beautiful experience, a beautiful thing, a beautiful result, a beautiful idea. And so what we do in the book is break it down into 13 dimensions to say, you don't need to necessarily to have a master's degree in design, but you do need to integrate the language of beauty into your work and into your life. And when you do, you get powerful results, partly because beauty is such a good indicator of order and intelligence. Like, Mr. Fuller famously said, I really don't think very much about beauty when I work, but I know if the result isn't beautiful, it probably isn't right. And it's why Steve Jobs insisted that the motherboard be beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, what was he really asking for? He wasn't necessarily asking for visual beauty. He was asking for rigorous coherence. And that is really the foundation of beauty.
Yeah.
And people will say, people have said to me already, well, beauty, it's different everywhere. And my response is, we can have a million definitions of beauty in different cultures and different places around the world. But the constant of beauty as our highest accomplishment is worldwide. And so that concept of beauty as something that that is an attainment, I think is consistent around the world. And so what that means is that we can define it how we like, but beauty is a really powerful idea, and it's a very powerful idea in terms of its competitive application.
Absolutely. And would you put care in there? I mean, when you were talking about Steve Jobs and the motherboard, the word that came to mind to me was, rarely anybody's going to see that beauty that was there. So that's, sort of caring from the inside out in a sense.
Yeah, it's such a good insight. I did a lecture for the Cooper Hewitt about their collection for the Design Museum, and I tried to understand what is the common denominator in all these different things, because they have a collection that includes practically everything. And I realized that the common denominator was caring. That if you think about what makes a thing a designed thing, it's that we care. It's that you're applying a kind of empathic caring, and you start with the individual, you start with the citizen, but you can't have a thriving citizen in a toxic community. So you extend that caring to the community, and you can't have a thriving community in a toxic ecology. So you extend that caring to the ecology. And that's why I think so many designers are involved in the kind of great conversations of our time, that we actually have a kind of caring methodology, and we kind of end up, whether we like it or not, caring about these big things.
Yeah, absolutely. So who does this really well? Like, what's a great example? I mean, of
I think any good design, at the heart of it is empathy and caring. because you're understanding your user, you're understanding their needs, their experience. Um, if you make a good software product, you've understood what I'm trying to do. like
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
trying to do something here. And if it works for me, if you've really taken the time to care about that and understand what I'm trying to do, it comes through. And so the great brands, look at Herman Miller.
Mm,
Herman Miller is a company. It's a really interesting example because they they sell almost nothing B2C. They mostly don't sell to consumers. They sell to businesses.
right.
So their clients are businesses, but they care about the worker. They care about the worker's experience and making that the best possible experience it can be. And in the process, they create the greatest value for their clients by caring about their people and their community, their environment, their experience. And I think that if you look across the businesses that are really, successful, good businesses, um, they have that kind of at the core.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sitting in my Herman Miller chair. I think a lot of us
Yeah.
uh,
So
ordered them now that we're all at home. So, I mean, which is a testament to exactly what you're saying. Like they're there for us in the office, but now we all have them at home as well.
Yeah.
Um, so another principle that I wanted to talk about was the one, be a whole brain creative. It's a talent, a skill. So, I mean, to really talk more about how designers can actually, practically apply this principle in their careers.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's a talent and a skill. In other words, some people just naturally do it. And I think a lot of designers have this as a kind of core operating system that
Right.
they naturally put analytics and creativity together. But not everyone, and not always to the highest level. And I've been working with Dean Julio Tino at Northwestern for a long time. He's the dean of the engineering school. And we're working on what he calls whole brain engineering. And it's really that ability to integrate the kind of systems analytics, the data, all that kind of thinking and working with real creativity, real kind of freedom, um, deep questions and caring, and all of the things that we think of at the core of design.
Right.
And really kind of integrate those two things into a methodology of really whole brain practice. And what we realized was that some of us have it naturally, but you can develop it. You can develop it, and you need to, in order to take on the big challenges, because the great challenges won't fit easily into the domains that we currently have. You're going to need to integrate both sides, and ultimately, everything that I do has to be, scientifically sound, and it has to work from that kind of technical side, but it really only works if it touches you emotionally.
Mm,
Right? It really only works if you love it in some way.
right.
And so I've got to figure out how to make both of those things happen simultaneously. And that's where the real whole brain practice comes into play.
I love that. And I love that there's a program that's looking at that for engineering at Northwestern. Do you have any advice for, design practitioners that are, maybe they feel like they've been put into a lane, they're working in, a company, and they are the product designer and they're given the requirements and the constraints, like how do we expand out of that and really, leverage all of our empathy and caring and whole brain and everything that we can bring to the table?
I like to advise people to become bilingual.
Mhm.
Right? So, like, if you have a language in one of those domains, which most of us do, like we either have one or the other, you have to figure out what the other language is about. You need to, and you can do it. There's unlimited amounts of online courses that are
Yeah,
available for either one of those domains. So
sure.
if you're in the analytics, explore the creative side. If you're in the creative side, explore the analytics. Really go over there and learn how to use numbers. Learn how to use quantification. Learn how to use the data. Integrate the data into your design process. And similarly, if you're in the analytics, explore creativity. Explore. It's not about becoming a masterful artist. In that case, it's about understanding the language and the process and the kind of the culture of the other side, so that you can develop a language to be able to speak to both. And I think that in the future, the people who are capable of that will be super valuable. They will be the ones creating the great wealth that we'll see in the coming decades.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if you think about, folks that have been trailblazers in whatever, dimension they're in, they're people that just continue to solve problems, whatever the problem might be. And they're already using, design principles and these ways of doing, not asking, should I do that? Should I not do that? That's just not even a question. It's just, they have to move
Yeah.
forward. So I'd love to hear from you. What's your favorite principle of the 24?
That's a great question. I think in some ways, the first one is the first for a reason. It's, maybe the most important, which is, first inspired design is leadership, lead by design. It's really taking responsibility to inspire. Say our job is to inspire. I can't make people do things. I have to inspire them. I have to show them something that is more exciting than their past. I have to show them a future that's better than their past, and inspire them to move there. I can't make them move there. The CEO can't make them move there. They've got to kind of be inspired. So that would be a good candidate. But I think the winner would be the last principle, which is work on what you love.
Mm.
And that was one that, frankly, for quite a long time during that kind of gestation period, I wasn't sure that it was a real principle. I wasn't sure that we should include it. But over time, I realized that maybe it's the most important one, because what it says is that if you can find in your life the people that you need to do your work, and find a way to really do the things you love, that's the most that you have to offer to the world. The greatest gift you have for the world is your creativity applied and connected to your passion. And when people do that, when they get a lock on the things that they love and their energy and passion, the results are really extraordinary. The results change the world. And our world is not really designed for that. It's not supportive of what you love necessarily. And I realized that a lot of the students that came to, when I give a lecture, typically, not anymore, but typically when I give a lecture, students come up afterwards, and what they really want to know about is that problem. They can see that I work on what I love.
Yeah.
And they know that that's what got them to where they are now, that their love has carried them this far, and they can see that it's going to be challenging to actually hold on to that love when they kind of enter the real world. And so they are, they ask about it. They never mention the word love because it's too uncool, but really that is what they're asking about. And And so I think that in some ways that's my my favorite principle.
Yeah, those are my, I know we talked about other ones, but those two, those are, and I'm so glad that you talked about the first one because, and the last one, because I love both of those as well. And I think that even before I was introduced to the book, I mean, that doing what you love, it was always, you know, if folks on my team were struggling, I would always remind them, you know, what you're passionate about and how you got here. And I think also that as designers, if we can bring it to sort of the nut of the passion is really about solving a problem. It doesn't really matter what the problem is. Like that's the thing that I mean, for me, that's the thing that drives me. And I would, you know, see folks sort of get tripped up in like, this isn't the problem I want to solve, but it really like bring back to like our passion is solving problems, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm personally just wildly promiscuous when it comes to problems. You know,
Yeah. Well, clearly, I mean, your career trajectory shows this.
I mean, I've done so many projects. I didn't even know there was such a thing. Like, you know, Michael Maharam called me one day and said, I need you to design a panel fabric." And I was like, what's a panel fabric?" You know? And so there are things out there that you know, I never would have imagined. I mean, I was commissioned to design the future of Mecca, you know, to do it.
Yeah, I saw you talk. I saw that one.
And if you had said to me, you know, when I was a kid, you know, pay attention, Bruce, because you're going to have to design Mecca, I would have said, you know, that's not very likely. You know, I didn't know there was a problem with Mecca.
Yeah.
And, you know, it seems to be the place where everyone wants to go. So what's the problem? Well, there is a problem. You know, hundreds of people die every year because of the way the city's designed. So, but I think that holding on to that kind of, you know, holding on to that really as a kind of value and holding on to it and understanding that you have to protect it, that you have to, yeah, I did the commencement address for Columbia College in Chicago a few years ago. I did it as a lounge act. I did a lounge act about love, right? And and I had a piano accompaniment, a woman who played love songs on the piano, and I talked about, you know, how important it was to understand your love and to carry it through your life, and that you would meet people who lost their love, you know, who forgot that they had it, who set it down somewhere along the way and compromised and couldn't find it again, and people who were angry that they had lost their love and expected to you know, extract some punishment for you because you still have yours.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, I think it was one of the best things I've ever done, because the reaction to the, you know, the music opened up a channel of emotion that the text didn't, and it was, I think, a really powerful effect.
Experience. You created
Yeah.
an experience. Amazing. So I'm going to ask you one last question. What's next for Bruce Small?
Well, I think for me, the real ambition is to apply the MC24 principles, to really, you know, apply that to the great challenges that we face. You know, we are currently facing a kind of sedimentary crisis, you know, a layered set of crises, you know, in, you know, racism and social justice, and climate and the pandemic, of course, and governance, kind of a crisis of governance. So all of these things are really in deep trouble. And, we're going to do as much as we can to really apply the principles to those and to help others to really, to build an interface for the principles where we can reach out and help as many people as possible advance things.
Sounds amazing, and the perfect application for this amazing piece of work that you've put out in the world for all of us. So thank you, Bruce, for taking the time to answer all of my questions and for the chat. It was lovely to see you and to hear from you.
Thank you so much. It's really a great opportunity. Thank you.